What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Combat Corporation, your source of combat sports. I'm your host, Al the Postmaster Morrow, and today we got another segment of combat topics here. As you know from the last video I made, I want to start making a new topic series here on the channel, and today I want to talk about the breaking news. I just released a PFL Fight Glove video in celebration of this. Francis Ngannou just signed one of the biggest deals, if not the biggest groundbreaking deal in MMA history. The last time I remember a deal this big, not just financially, but just like as big of a deal in MMA, was when Demetrius Johnson was traded for Ben Askren. And I remember that was a huge deal. But basically, guys, if you don't know the whole background of the story, Francis Ngannou was the UFC heavyweight champion at one point in time. He lost to Stipe, lost to Derek Lewis, and he went on a 3-fight winning streak, got back to Stipe Miocic, knocked him out, and then defended his title against Cyril Gane once. And in that whole time, he was talking about how unhappy he was with the UFC. So he went through contract negotiations for really almost a year before he even just finally left the UFC. And we haven't had a UFC champion leave as the champion, I want to say, since BJ Penn in the early 2000s. It could have been, I know Randy Couture wanted to leave as well to go fight Fedor back in the day. But I know, I think he fought outside the UFC once before he got sued to come back to the UFC. But Francis Ngannou made a big deal. Dana White came out and said, and obviously Dana White will say a lot of things to people he doesn't like, that Francis Ngannou was going to have the most lucrative deal out of any heavyweight. He would have been paid almost second most compared to Conor McGregor, and he was saying all these big things of how much Francis was going to get paid. But then he said there were a lot of unrealistic demands that Francis was making. And then on top of it, over the last couple of weeks, we saw that the president of BKFC, president of One Championship, were all saying that they were on the same page for a lot of things, but he was asking very unrealistic demands, not all financial. And I was wondering what that was. Now, Francis, when he was in the UFC and he left the UFC, talked to Ariel Helwani and a couple other guys on, DCRC and everything else, after he left the UFC, saying that he wanted health insurance for other fighters, he wanted health insurance for himself, he wanted fighters to get percentages of the gate, percentage of the pay-per-view, he wanted fighters to be able to go do what they want outside of just fighting for the UFC. Maybe if they want to go box, they're able to go do that if they can't find a fight or something like that. Well, come to find out, Francis's actual deal has a lot of that included with the PFL, and I can kind of see why other guys said that some of them were unrealistic, quote. And we'll go into that in a minute. But Francis Ngannou's deal basically is over 7 figures each fight, so he's going to make millions of dollars each and every fight he has in the PFL. He's going to fight in the super fight division, which is what Jake Paul was going to fight in. So he's not going to be in the actual season tournament. He won't make his debut until 2024 because in his contract it states he can go box if he so chooses or do any other combat sport if he so chooses until 2024. And even in that meantime, he can go box. And he's saying that he wants to box Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder. He wants to do small glove boxing with Tyson Fury and a bunch of other heavyweights, and he wants to jump into the world of boxing. It also said in his contract that he's going to be a chairman for the PFL Africa. He's also going to have equity in the company, basically meaning that he's going to have some say of what happens in the company. Company makes a certain amount of money on the card. He gets a percentage of that. He's also going to get 50% of the pay-per-view towards him, which is insane. I could have read that wrong on some of the forums, but I'm pretty positive it said 50% of the revenue. A cool thing that a lot of people are talking about is that he's put it in his contract too, that his opponents will make a minimum of $2 million or else he will not fight them. He wants his opponents to be well taken care of. And a lot of people are thinking that he's taking the high road that way, which is really, really cool. That they're doing that, because that means that the smaller guy is going to make some money too, and that does not often happen, actually. Now, that's a really big deal in the world of MMA because this has just never happened before. When we talk about that, like I said, he's also going to be chairman of PFL Africa, so I imagine they're going to try and get a show in Africa, and they're going to try and do stuff in Africa, get more African talent and stuff like that, especially from where he's from in Cameroon and other locations, and then he also wants to give back to those communities. If you watch his interviews, he tries to give back to those communities, open gyms, and give equipment to gyms that are existing or to programs that exist in Africa for MMA, boxing, kickboxing, whatever it might be. So let's dissect his deal a little bit and talk about, the amount of money that he's going to be making is is well over in the millions. You know, he's going to make millions of dollars a fight now, which is, you know, I think he made close to that in the UFC. I think I can't remember what his last UFC payout was. I remember one of them was 600,000 disclosed pay, right? And that's the thing. That's what the UFC is disclosing to people. That's what he's disclosing. I don't think he's ever flat out said this is how much he made. I'd have to go back and look. But now, bare minimum, if he's going to be making, say, 50% of pay-per-view, his opponents are making 2, how much do you think he's going to make? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? Let's just hypothetically say he's making $8 million. His opponent's making 2. That's $10 million being shelled out. Then, of course, he's going to pay his management, probably the standard rate for management nowadays from remembering college anyway, whether it be athletics, music, or anything. Standard rate is 11%. Some people do 9.5%. I don't know his percentage with his management team, but let's just say it's 11% or 10%, right? So it's $10 million, 10% of that, or $8 million, 10% of that, plus pay-per-view. We'll just say Francis grosses $10 million for that fight. Then he has to give 10% of that to his management team, maybe 5 or 6% of that money to his coaches or whoever rate he made out. At the end of the day, Francis is still probably going to walk away with millions of dollars in his bank account. Same thing with his opponent. Now, the big drawback to that, I'm wondering, and I want you guys to chime in on this too. The big drawback for me would be if he's making that much money on the head of the card. Same thing with him. I wonder if it's going to kind of be like how boxing is, because a lot of people see the top tier of boxers making millions of dollars, like Canelo Alvarez and some other ones. He's making millions and millions of dollars, but then the rest of the card, you see guys are making $35,000 to win, $35,000 to show, and stuff like that. And that's the crazy thing about how some of that sport works. So I'm worried with the PFL, unless they have it figured out, that if Francis and opponent, say, like I said, we'll just put $10 million aside just for 2 gentlemen that night. How much are the other guys on the card going to make? What if you have another PFL champion that's mad that this newcomer, Francis Ngannou, although, yes, it's Francis Ngannou, he's a really big deal in the MMA world, one of the scariest heavyweights in MMA history, obviously, puts people to sleep when he barely hits you, you know, and that's the thing about him. You know, a champion under them might get mad about that, or a guy that's been in the PFL for a while and be like, well, why am I not making that type of money? You know, and is Francis Ngannou that big of a deal to where I'm not making that amount of money? Now, obviously, I think Francis Ngannou is probably the most high-profile sign that PFL's ever had. It's making waves. I think Francis Ngannou was huge when he left the UFC, and people have really been ridiculing him over the last few weeks because everyone's like, man, is he going to be impossible to deal with? Is this by ONE FC and Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship and Bellator, and a couple other people are like, oh, we don't want to deal with him because he's making some really unrealistic things. Eddie Hearn with boxing has been talking to him, so let's go into that part. Francis says, I want to box Anthony Joshua. I want to box Deontay Wilder. I want to box Tyson Fury. I want to box all these big champions. That's the other thing, is he's talking about making all this money for himself and then other people around him, but then at the same time, he's going to supersede all the ranked contenders, basically break the mold of what the sanctioning bodies in boxing does now by forcing fighters and champions to fight mandatory challengers so they get their shot. Now Francis is just going to magically supersede all that and step in against those guys. Now Anthony Joshua does not hold a belt at the moment, and neither does a world title at the moment. And neither does Deontay Wilder. You know, Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk hold the belts right now. I believe it goes, Tyson Fury holds WBC, and then Usyk holds the others, basically, they're all the alphabet belts. I wish there was just one undisputed title. I just wish it went back to that. That way, whatever. But Francis is going to go through all those rankings and then basically take on one of those guys and hold up boxing. And then he's going to hold up the PFL. But he's not in the actual season, so it's not like there's going to be a heavyweight champion that's just not there, that's not present. He's going to be in the super fight series, whatever that might be, right? And so now you're skipping people in boxing. You're waiting until 2024 to fight in MMA. So now that's another thing happening. Then on top of it, let's go into, say, not only with his boxing deal and everything else, now he's getting equity from the company. How much is he going to siphon from each pay-per-view? How much is he going to siphon from each thing, right? You're taking a lot from PFL just to have this one guy fight. And then the big question, which someone put in the comments, which I thought was really interesting of the article I read, I think it was by, I want to say it was by Bloody Elbow made it, and someone commented, was Francis Ngannou really this big a deal to make this much of a commotion? Now, I think he is in a lot of ways. For one, being a heavyweight, I mean, I respect anyone amongst heavyweights that can just easily put guys our size or even bigger than me. I'm technically a small heavyweight as far as height goes, but put guys his size or bigger out by just touching them, right? And that's a big thing, is we haven't really seen that in MMA really since Shane Carwin, Anthony Johnson, who was a light heavyweight and welterweight, middleweight, light heavyweight. The Francis Ngannou universally just has the power to put people out. And he also looked like a physical specimen. A lot of people are like, man, it's the new Mike Tyson. I don't think Francis Ngannou will ever get to the star power of a Mike Tyson. Because Mike Tyson was just a freak anomaly in the sport of boxing. A lot of people will tell you, like real boxing historians will say, in some people's minds, he doesn't even rank in the top 10 of greatest heavyweights of all time. But then you talk to an average person that's never even watched a true boxing match, will tell you Mike Tyson's the best fighter of all time, period. No one would ever beat him, whether it be MMA, kickboxing, boxing, doesn't matter, he'll win. That's the thing. I don't think you can say the same thing about Francis Ngannou yet. He still has time to work, but at the same time, he's also in his mid-30s. I think he's 36 now. So he's at the tail end for athletics, anyway. Usually in your mid-30s is when you start to taper off. Sometimes some people like to thrive in their mid-30s, and he started kind of late in life anyway. But he's a freak talent. He's freakishly strong. He has freak power. And that's why I think he is such a big deal. And I think, too, a lot of people are going to like the message he's doing. On the flip side of that, will this hurt other fighters in the future? Because with anything in history, when one person starts a groundbreaking thing, it tends to piss a lot of people off. And what I mean by that is, when you have that issue of Francis Ngannou starting it, right? And then you have guys like Curtis Blades and other guys saying, well, I wish I could do that, but I can't because no one will ever listen to me, because of my position. And Francis wants those guys to have those health insurance things. He wants them to make more money and everything else. But then I worry that if you're going to have other guys in the UFC see Francis leave and Francis say something along the lines of, people should come here and do exactly what I did, stick it to the man, I worry that fighters are going to get held. They're not going to get fights. They're going to be given to the sharks. And because you've seen that happen in the UFC. You've seen that happen in Bellator 1. Everyone's guilty of it. If you piss the boss off, you tend to reap really bad repercussions that you just don't deserve at the end of the day. Because like Leon Edwards in a situation with Colby Covington, right? I think Colby's a good fight for Leon. I think Leon will probably win. But Leon Edwards is like, I think I should have a say as a champion. Obviously, the UFC thinks differently, right? And that's the type of idea Francis Ngannou was trying to get away from. It's like, Leon Edwards is a champion. How can you tell him he doesn't have a right to it, right? That's what I worry about, is that Leon Edwards is going to see someone like Francis say, okay, I'm just not going to fight. And then it's going to breach a contract. They're going to strip him of the belt that he worked so long and hard to get. And then they're going to hold him in a contract. Hold him in a contract. They're going to not let him go through his matching clause and everything. And then on top of it, Leon is just going to wind up getting ousted from the UFC, and then he's going to expect the same deal from PFL, right? Or same deal from One Championship. And I think that's a big deal. Like when One FC said Francis Ngannou was asking for too much and we didn't see eye to eye morally, I think I get what they meant in that. And I don't think Francis is asking for all the things in the world as much as people think. But if you did that for every single fighter, the business would never survive. That's just the deal behind it. Unfortunately, people don't understand that. I know from working from different promotions, local pro or amateur promotions, of how things would work. If you gave that same deal to every single fighter on the card, you have to have massive backing. You've got to increase the pay-per-view buys and sale price. Like each pay-per-view would have to be over $200 basically to cement all that, and that's the thing about that. I worry that other fighters would get damaged from this because they're going to see Francis Ngannou lead from example. I think it is a good step in the right direction of what fighters should earn and owe to themselves, and I think a lot of fighters will start to follow suit. I just hope it doesn't hurt them. The last thing I want to approach is, a lot of people talk about John Jones on Twitter. You might have seen John Jones and Francis Ngannou kind of go back and forth. Francis Ngannou saying, I'm really the baddest man on the planet. Come across the street and fight me. And John Jones is like, you're talking smack across the street. I've never had the baddest guy tell me to walk across the street. you come to me. You left to duck me. Now, I think we can squash that idea. Francis Ngannou didn't leave the UFC to duck anyone. He left it for his own reasons. He wants to do what Francis Ngannou wants to do. He wants to be an independent contractor and do what Francis Ngannou wants to do. Doesn't want something holding him back at all times. Although I do think that you should uphold to your contract, which he did. And he fought out his contract, and then he went to PFL. That much he did. He honored his end of the deal. They couldn't give him what he wanted. Therefore, he says, okay, well, I'm going to take my business elsewhere. And that's basically how it went. But Jon Jones saying this, I think Francis should stop with that. And who am I to say anything? I'm just some scrub on YouTube. I understand. But the idea is you're calling out Jon Jones when you know he can't come fight you now. And that kind of bugs some people, especially guys that are Jon Jones fan. I'm a Jon Jones fan. I have been for a long time. He only grew up 2 hours from where I live, which is awesome. I've met him a few times. Really nice guy in person anyway, regardless of, everything that's happened. But, I think Francis maybe should lay off on the whole, Jon Jones come fight me here and stuff, because obviously Jon Jones is never going to leave the UFC. He's going to probably fight Stipe, win, lose, or draw. He's going to retire and say, I'm done. I've done literally everything. I'm the best ever. Why would I need to drop everything, go to a different promotion, which most people don't view as the same level as the UFC, drop myself down to lose or win against you when it doesn't do anything for me, is what I would be thinking as Jon Jones. If I were thinking that, Francis would knock me out with a pinky, and that would be the end of it all. But, that's just my opinion on the whole thing. I think he should maybe lay off on Jon Jones. But I think it would be cool to see more co-promotions. But UFC's never going to co-promote. It's like the NFL going, although I don't know. I actually don't know. Maybe I should make this analogy. But it's like the NFL going to do, like they might do a scrimmage against the CFL, but it's not like they're going to have a game in the middle of the season like NFL versus CFL. No, it just doesn't work that way, or it's not going to be like an Olympic gold medalist fighting a pro world champion in their first boxing match. It just doesn't work. Or having a high school wrestler go against an Olympic gold medalist. Why go out of your way to do that? It's basically the idea of co-promotion to the eyes of the UFC and other guys. But that's my whole ideas on Francis Ngannou signing with PFL. Overall, I think it's cool. I'm just curious to see how it'll play out. I want to know what this whole super fight thing is with the PFL and see how that'll work out. I hope it works well. I just kind of hope the whole thing with Jon Jones dies out, because I think it's a little silly. And I'm curious to see if it will be beneficial in the future. But I do think for the next 2 or 3 years, you're going to see a lot more fighters start to fight and really make a different change. And I think MMA as a landscape, part of me hopes that it adopts some things of boxing. Part of me hopes it doesn't, because I really love how UFC works. Usually, not UFC, MMA works. Usually the best do fight the best in our sport. I'd like to believe that anyway. Obviously, in some cases like Colby, and I personally think the guys like I think Bilal Muhammad earned his shot this last couple of weeks against Colby. Against Leon Edwards more than Colby has. I think Colby should have fought either one of those guys, or should fight maybe Gilbert Burns and then fight the winner then. Or, now you got Usman wanting to fight Hamzat and all those guys. A lot of things are going on in the welterweight division. And then on top of it, guys, we got to remember, we can't overload the champions. They can fight 3 times a year, maybe, if they're not injured. And on top of it, that is a grueling schedule. It is a grueling schedule. But I hope those fighters get what they deserve. I just hope that because of this, it doesn't hurt them. As much as silly as that might sound, I worry that it might damage them because of what they see Francis Ngannou doing. Everyone might want to follow suit. And people that are bigger than Francis in the sport might not be able to do that because one guy did it. Doesn't mean everyone else is going to do it. But that's my opinion at the end of the day. Please let me know if I'm full of it. Let me know if you agree. I love to hear what you have to say in the comments below. Like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and comment below of other things that you want me to talk about on the channel, because I really want to keep this series going. It's really cool. I love talking to you guys. The last video got some nice, good reception. I love talking to you guys. Some guys message me privately on Instagram and stuff. Follow me on my social media pages, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Post to usually Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok daily. Twitter, I'm horrible at. So, but besides that, guys, I really appreciate you watching. Like I said, comment below. Let's have a discussion. Thanks for watching another episode of Combat Topics, and I'll see you on the next episode. Have a good one, everybody.